Okay, so we saw the first type, function type, okay, which is there. Okay, now as I explained to you, in the first type which is there, we are taking care of input, processing and output all together at once. Okay, fine, let me just get back to this one. Okay, fine. So in the first type which is there, what we are doing is, let me just change the color so that it is, yeah, fine. So we are dealing with input, okay, and we are doing the processing, and we are dealing with the output all together in this one function only. Inside the function everything is taken care of. You are getting some values, you are doing some calculations, you are giving some output. Okay, so this was your first type. Okay, now in the second type which is there, now in the second type also it is almost similar, I would say, but now here basically the section which is there, okay, that is return type but no parameters. No parameters means in the round brackets you won't be having anything written over there. Okay, but you have a return type now. Okay, so now what this return type means is, like, you will be sending some value back. Okay, fine. Or sending some value back in the sense, for example, say the syntax which is there. Okay, here now in the syntax, if I go ahead, okay, let's just convert the color to. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay, fine, let's do that again. Okay, fine. So you will be kind of doing something. So let's say what we will be doing. Something return value is coming. Suppose I name this function as function type function underscore 2. Okay, fine, this is the function name which is there, and in the kind of round brackets I'm sending nothing, right? So here this will be empty, so this will be as it is, and we have that curly brackets, and in the curly brackets we'll have some statements. Okay, fine. Okay, now whatever the statements are, okay, now the thing is, let's say, let's take an example of the addition program itself, right? So what we were doing was, we were kind of adding those two numbers, right? We were kind of taking the addition, and basically we are doing that, we are keeping that, saving that addition in that sum variable, right? Now what I will do is, instead of, okay, fine, that was an integer sum. Okay, what are the calculations are there? Now instead of displaying or printing the result directly inside the function itself, what I'll do is, I'll send the value back. Okay, so for that we'll use this keyword now, return. Okay, now this is kind of a new keyword for you. Okay, so what return will do is, from wherever this function was called, it will send some value back over there. Okay, now return what? I'll say return sum. Okay, now the sum which is there, the variable sum which is there, the data type of that variable is integer. That's why here in the return type, what I'll do is, I'll type int. Okay, because I am returning an integer. Okay, so what I am returning, I am doing some calculations, and whatever the calculation was, whatever the data type of that variable is, that variable basically I am returning, that data type basically I am writing in return type. Okay, and that value will be returned. Okay, so now, like, if I go to code, okay, fine, I'll simply use the function type 1. So let's say I'll simply copy this part. Okay, I'll paste it here. Okay, now the thing which is there, this part which is there, the printing part, I am not going to do the printing part over here. I am going to do the printing part in my main, from wherever I have called it, or whatever that is. Okay, fine. So suppose I'll create a function type 2. Okay, and this takes two variables, it is doing the addition, and after the addition the processing is done. The value which is there, the sum which is there, I'll say return the sum value. Acha, now the data type of this variable sum which is there, that is integer. That's why instead of this writing this void, I'll write int over here. Okay, now if I run this program, okay, now check out the funny thing which is there. If I just say run this program, okay, I'll say function type 2.c. Okay, fine. Return 0 because something is already in execution. Let's say close this. Okay, fine. Acha, then again I have to call the function 2 because function 1 doesn't exist. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so I'm calling it, I'm getting 0 warnings. Now when I run this thing, okay, so now you can see the value which is there, it is coming over here. It has entered the first number, it will save it in A. Suppose I'll give the same values, okay, for as earlier 23, and the second number I gave was 12. Okay, fine, I gave this number, and now I press enter. Fine, so you can see the sum didn't get printed. Okay, then again we haven't written any line called as printf sum is equal to that sum, and we haven't written that thing, so that's what obvious that is not printed. But what has actually happened is over here basically, okay, so over here this sum value got returned, but what happened was instead of this thing 35 was returned over here, something like this. Okay, acha, now you might think this should give an error, but actually it won't give an error. If I just say compile this code also, you can see 0 error, 0 warnings is coming, even if I just write a number and a semicolon. Okay, so what is actually happening is system is declaring that number and there's a semicolon, that statement is ended. Now what happened to this number, what should we do with this number, we have not specified anything. Okay, suppose say now then again, but obvious we need to save that number in some variable. Suppose say I'll take, suppose an integer, suppose x. Fine, and what I'll say x is equal to 35 now. So now this will take an effect. Now in x variable, in that variable x, that 35 will get saved. Similarly, what I'll have to do is I'll have to call that function, okay, function type 2, and I have to kind of say x is equal to this function type 2. So what will happen is when the program counter comes over here, okay, it encounters this x, it will declare that variable in the system. It will say x is equal to this function. So what will happen is it will jump onto this function now. It will try to execute whatever the values are there, and from there it is getting a return value, right? So it will return that value, and that value will be coming over here now. Whatever the value will be there will be replaced over here like this, and that will be saved in x. Okay, so that's how basically we'll kind of return that value. And what I'll say is I'll simply print the value of x. I'll say x is equal to %d, and I'll print the value of x. Or if you want to write sum is equal to, that is also fine, not an issue. Fine, sum is equal to this thing. Okay, so now when I say compile this code, 0 error, 0 warnings, and now when I'm running this code, okay, so I'll get that, I'll write the same numbers itself. Okay, so I'll say 23 and I'll say 12, right? So the sum is equal to 35. Now where this sum is equal to 35 was there? In the main, not inside this function, right? Okay, now then again one more thing you need to kind of realize over here, we are just taking the input and the processing part over here, right? We are not taking the output part. So in kind of your program basically, okay, so whenever you want to kind of, okay, my bad, just a second, okay, fine, okay, so in kind of programming, whenever you want to have input and processing only, and the output will be done somewhere else, right? So you'll have your input, you will have your processing, okay, and there won't be any output will be returned, okay, and you will say return maybe output. Okay, let's just move it a bit there. Yeah, return output. Fine. Okay, so in this scenario what is going to happen is it is kind of the type 2 function that you have kind of, you're returning some value, you're doing the input part, you're doing the processing part, but the output you're not printing it over here, you're returning the output somewhere else and you're printing it somewhere else, right? So in our this function, this is what has happened. We are taking the input, we are doing the calculations, the processing part, but the output we are returning to someone. Where we are returning, from where the function got called. So the function was called from this line, right? So the output was returned on this line. Okay, so this is kind of your type 2 function.